The Golden Watch. I live in the streets of New York City. Yes, it's a big city with lots of opportunities, but unfortunately for me, I'm homeless. I have tried applying for a job, but I have no mailing address and there is no way to contact me. I just come as it is. I did have a construction job that lasted only 2 weeks. The boss had to let me go due to my hygiene problem, and I was okay with being fired. The wage was small. It only allowed me to stay at a motel twice a week, and the rest of the money I had to portion it out for meals, which led to my hygienic problem. Now I just take any small job I can find. Some people want me to dump their trash, and some people want me to clean their yards, so I do it for a small pay. Everything was fine until I came across a golden watch. About a week ago, I was just walking the big city when I seen an older but wealthier man wearing a suit and tie along with a fedora hat. He dropped a golden watch. Now, it's never been in my nature to steal, but I was hungry and I hadn't eaten in 2 days. So I took an opportunity. At least that's what I thought. As the older man kept walking, I closed in on the golden trinket that lay on the floor. So shiny, and the engraving on it was so glimmering. I quickly picked it up and I put it in my pocket. And then I started to walk away. I got to my alleyway. Well, I call it my alleyway because that's where you could find me most of the time. And quickly pulled out the golden watch. Engraved on it was 5MI. Time is running. I opened the watch and inside it was a very beautiful display. Everything in it was made of gold, but on the bottom of the watch was a figure of a man wearing a jogging outfit. Looked like he didn't belong inside. I didn't care, I was going to sell it anyway. I closed the watch, placed it in my pocket and began to walk towards the pawn shop. Once there, I tried to pull the golden watch out to sell it, but it wasn't in my pocket anymore. I searched all my pockets and couldn't find it. The guy who was attending me seemed a bit edgy, so I left. I quickly began to retrace my steps to see if I could find it, but I didn't see it on the ground. I didn't see it anywhere. Feeling defeated, I put my hands back into my pocket to make my way back home. That's when I felt it. It was in my pocket the whole time, but I remember searching there. With the golden watch in my hand, I now walked back to the pawn shop, but it faded into thin air as soon as I entered the place. Was I going crazy? Is this really happening? I walked back outside the shop and the watch reappeared in my hand. I then tried to sell it to a passerby, but the watch would fade right before I can show it to them. It was clear that this golden watch was only meant for me. I couldn't get rid of it unless I unknowingly dropped it on the floor for someone else to find. But what good was that to me? I needed money. For the next 2 days, I kept it all in my alleyway. I didn't want to lose it, and one night I started messing with the crown. Except this one didn't move the minute or the hour hands at all. The night was windy. Trash and debris was lingering in the air. When I suddenly pulled the crown, everything went quiet. No honking, no talking, no wind rustling around, and the trash along with the debris was just frozen in midair. I pushed the crown back down on the golden watch, and everything went back to normal. The honking, talking, and of course, the wind. At that moment, I realized that I could stop time with this watch. But I was not entirely sure, so I walked to a remarkably busy intersection and pulled the crown once more. Everything had stopped right before my eyes. I was amazed with the power that this watch had. And I'll admit, I did pickpocket some of the wealthiest people I've seen on the intersection, bringing in around $850 that night. The strange thing was that right before I pushed the crown back down, I heard a painful scream off in the distance, as if someone had been tortured to death. But it wasn't any of my concern, and I still wonder how that happened when I had stopped time. It did not matter much to me. I had enough money to pay a motel, buy me some clothes, and of course, give me a good meal. I laid in bed just thinking of all the possibilities that lied ahead of me now that I had this watch. I did not have to starve anymore or work hard just to barely make a living. This new trinket I had found was the key to happiness and success. It was just what I needed. For the next few days, I did what I had to do, anything to make sure I didn't starve anymore, and of course, had a place to live. I had been thinking about buying me a house, a car, and having a family for once in my life. But the strangest thing had started to happen to me. Every time I stopped time itself, I began hearing footsteps running in the distance. Someone was unaffected by this watch, or maybe it's getting to a breaking point, and if it was breaking, I wouldn't be able to fix it. And to trust a repairman with my valuable finding was not something I was going to do. But who cares? I don't. One miserable person running around while I stop time is not going to bother me. So I continued to use the watch to my advantage. That's until I saw him. It was the wealthy man with the suit and tie wearing the fedora hat. It was him who had been running all along. Not just that, he was running towards me while I had stopped time. He was the guy who didn't seem to be affected by time. Everyone else stood frozen on spot, except for him. He was about 300 feet away from me when I had seen him running towards me. I got scared as I didn't want him to ask me about the watch or know that I had it. So I pushed the crown back down and time went back to normal as he faded into thin air. Was it my imagination or my guilty conscience? I had enough money at this point, so I had decided to move from Manhattan to Yonkers. Not much of a difference, but at least I would be away and wouldn't have to worry about the guy with the fedora hat anymore. I set up and waited once again in one of the busiest intersections. I waited to see the crowd. I usually preyed on the wealthy. It took me standing there for at least 10 minutes, I would say, until I seen what I wanted. So I quickly stopped time. I began pickpocketing, unaware of the mistake I was making, unaware of much of my surroundings. Then I seen it. He was at least 100 feet from me now. I quickly pulled out the watch and pushed the crown back in. Time went back to normal. The fedora hat guy faded again. But now I stood in front of my victim with his belongings in my hand. I pretended to be a magician and returned all his stuff. I mean, one second I was there and the next second I have all his belongings in my hand. What better way to play it off than by pretending to be a magician? At this point, I concluded that the guy with the fedora hat only appeared to me when I stopped time, and I also realized that he was coming for me. No matter where I was, this guy was going to appear at a distance from where he last made it to. I had to prove this theory, so I went to a less busy place with a long road. That way I could see for myself. I pulled the watch out and I pulled the crown. Everyone froze, and from thin air, the guy wearing the fedora hat had appeared and began running towards me. I was immediately horrified as I pushed the crown back in. Time went back to normal. The guy faded once again, but the image of him, that would never leave my memory. I had seen him in detail. He was running at me at full speed. His body seemed to have many broken bones, yet he ran. His jaw was hanging down to his chest, hanging by the skin on his face, yet that didn't stop him. He seemed to have been dead already. His suit was torn to pieces, and he seemed much taller than the average person. Not how I remembered him, but I knew it was him. I had to do something to avoid this person or creature from getting to me. I figured I had to use the watch one more time and then just drop it somewhere so someone else can deal with him. I knew that my plan was going to get someone killed, but if it wasn't me, I was okay with that. I did some research to find the wealthiest person in Manhattan, or at least one of the wealthiest, and went back to my hometown. Some rich dude was having a get together there, which meant I had to pickpocket as many people as I could before this person with the hat got to me. I at least needed to push the crown back in and return time to normal once this person was at least 20 feet away from me. I didn't want him any closer. I made it to the get together, but they didn't let me in. I wasn't invited, which meant I had to be quick and agile to make it through the crowd. I stood at the entrance, and I had an idea. I was going to ask the guard to call the person throwing the party to come to the door, and that I was an old friend of his. Luckily, my plan worked. As soon as I seen him, I pulled out the golden watch and quickly pulled the crown. Time stopped, and I seen the figure running at full speed towards me. While I ran towards the wealthy man, I quickly took out his wallet and yanked his golden necklace and began to run away from the scene, and the figure was running after me. I made it 20 feet from the entrance to the place when I felt safe enough to push the crown back in, and so I did. The figure was now only 15 feet away from me when he suddenly faded away, but it didn't matter anymore. I was going to get rid of the golden watch anyway, so I didn't have to ever see him again. I knew I couldn't just throw the watch as it would only appear back in my pocket or hands. I had to lose it in a natural way. It's the only way it wouldn't come back, so I tied it to one of my belt loops using a single piece of thread. The watch was heavy enough that if I just went on about my day, the watch would eventually break that piece of thread and I would lose it without ever noticing. My only worry at this point was, what if the fall triggers the crown to come out and it stops time? That unsettling figure would get me, so I had to do it in a grassy area. That way the chances of this happening were way smaller. I did what I had planned, and by the end of the day, the golden watch was gone. I don't know where it fell, but it did. And hopefully, the next person that uses it and sees the horrifying figure can forgive me. I laid in a motel room again. I needed to save money by getting a motel instead of hotel. I was flipping a coin while I lay there, when suddenly, the coin stopped in midair. My heart sunk. My breathing got heavier. My heart raced, as if it wanted out. I knew that whoever got a hold of the golden watch had pulled the crown, and therefore stopped time. And somehow, it still affected me. I didn't have much time to process what was going on before the figure wearing the fedora hat had appeared in my room, 15 feet away from me. He quickly suspended me out of bed and tore my clothes looking for the golden watch. Before it opened my mouth so much that it broke my jaw. I felt my soul leave my dead body, and somehow, now I can hear the golden watch ticking wherever it is. It's always good to live an honest life. Even if you think that the solution to your problems just fell out of someone's pocket, taking a chance could lead you to jail, or worse, where realms collide. This story was written by me. If you like my stories and you wish to hear more, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe.